deserve. You're scared because you feel no one can really help, but the first step is finding your inner strength. We stand, we shout, no more blood, no more tears, no more shame. Now silence will no longer know us by name. Freedom, freedom from fear, time to report. Freedom from slurs, time to break out. Freedom, freedom, time for respect. Freedom will no longer be my neglect. Freedom, speak out, report now.
Where's that, there we go. Yes. Thank you. I need to, can I remove this? I don't need, the laptop, just put it here, then I use mine. I'm not presenting from it here, I'm just reading from it.
Then video play from there, right?
You just put it here. It's fine, it's fine. And then is the speakers on? The microphone?
Yeah.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think such is any perspective to do any session that has to start with young people, it always starts with music, right? That song says Freedom Calls, and I thought it was an apt choice of song and lyrics, around issues of young people and how to engage young people in the discourse on gender issues, around engaging men and boys for gender justice. One of the easiest parts of my job today, once I remember to also introduce myself, is to introduce the delightful panel of guests that I have. I just found it very interesting how when I asked all four of them what they do for fun, they actually had to stop and think about it. And so, without further ado, let's start the session. My name is Bimikwa Manyane, and I work for Sonke Gender Justice, and I'll be moderating today's session. I'm going to start off with introducing my guests. First up is Jose Roberto Luna Manzanero. I used to think only in Africa do we get more than 4 names. So I'm sitting at 6. I'm yet to find anyone with 6 names or more. Jose works at the UNFPA as a youth education and masculinity specialist, promoting youth perspectives, sexual and reproductive health rights, comprehensive sexuality education, and also encourages youth participation in political spaces. Jose is also the focal point of Men Engage in Guatemala and advisor to the Latin America and the Caribbean Youth Network for Sexual Health and Reproductive Rights, amongst many others. You'll soon learn that just introducing these 4 people will probably take half the session. But the one thing that Jose did say, the one thing that he did say he likes doing is dancing, and so he likes salsa and Latin, and his favorite thing to do is to cook. And I said to him, those are all the comfort things, so I think that's a good start. And next to Jose is Lindsay. Lindsay Maynard-Freeman is the Advocacy and Communications Manager at Women Deliver, which is a global advocacy organization working to reduce maternal mortality and to achieve universal access to reproductive health. She's worked for over a decade as a youth activist and advocate for sexual and reproductive health rights, working for over 3 years with the Global Youth Coalition on HIV and AIDS, which I found interesting because I think many of the young people in here either started with GYCA or know about GYCA. So I think it's full circle, right? Many of us have been part of that. where she also works facilitating leadership building opportunities, leading communication efforts, and identifying partnership opportunities. I just could not get out of Lindsay what she does for fun, and I hope we'll get her to share soon. And next to Lindsay is Sami Kisi. Samuel Kisi is a youth development consultant based in Accra, Ghana, and currently works with Curious Minds Ghana. He has been a youth activist for over 10 years, working at national, regional, and global levels. He was the chair of the drafting process of the ICPD Global Youth Forum, the Bali Declaration, as well as being the co-chair of this Youth Steering Committee of the African Regional Conference on Population and Development. What I didn't mention, though, was that Lindsay also works on CSW and ICPD, and so you're looking at a group of young people who are doing work at a national level and also globally. Next to Sami is Zishan Mohammed. Zishan is a youth development practitioner who also leads his own organization called the Ye Ek Sok Foundation. Soch. Thank you. He's working towards the betterment of youth since 2012, and also is running a campaign under the name of Safer, which works to create a safe environment for women and girls traveling in public transportation, with young auto rickshaw drivers to sensitize them towards gender sensitization. Welcome. The way we're going to run this session today is we'll have a very informal discussion looking at youth perspectives on the work that we do. And so we will have almost a TV show type of presentation. It's going to be fairly interactive. And from time to time, should you have any inputs from the floor, we would really welcome to hear from you. Thank you, and we can start off. As I make my way to come and join you, I'd just like for you to start off talking to the crowd, to the participants, or rather to our audience, about why do you do this work? What prompted you to start work around youth activism? Some of you have been at it for 10 years or more, and we just want to know your personal story of change. Where did it all start? Jose, we can start off with you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you, sharing our experience in your perspectives. Well, about your question, I began my activism when I was 11 in Petén. This is the northern Guatemala. It's not a big city. It's a little town, and it's very, very away from the capital of the country. And when I was starting my activism in this area, the programs for youth people just doesn't exist. And I started my activism working with a program of adult women around family planning issues, sexuality, and other issues and topics around sexuality. And I was experiencing my own changes in my body, you know, and in my family. My father, my mother, they are teachers, but even in a teacher house, sexuality education was not present. My aunt, my cousin, all the young people and boys, girls in my family were asking about sexuality, and our family hasn't the conditions to talk about these topics with us. So I started the first program working with youth people in this organization, and this is a very good organization working on sexual and reproductive health and rights in this area of the country right now. They have a very nice program through the radio education, and I start trying to advocate and to do a reality, the national programs on comprehensive sexuality education in Guatemala, because I really know that to speak and to talk about sexuality in an open way, in a real way, without afraid, without concern or doubts, it's not just a right, it's a reality and necessity for young people. So that's my story. And then, well, I'm part of different commissions, committees, organizations, supporting the right to access to comprehensive sexuality education in Guatemala and Latin America.
Thanks, Tumi. So my evolution into this movement, I should say that I have a very feminist mother and father, so was privileged in that sense to have been introduced to these social justice issues very early in my life. But I started really working on gender equality, sexual reproductive health and rights in college from an abortion rights perspective in this little town in New Hampshire in the U.S. And I was in college and I was working as a counselor for women who were about to have abortion procedures. And many of the times, because I was 19 or 20 at the time, and many of the patients who were coming in were 15, 16, 17. And because I was the youngest staff person, it made a lot of sense for me to be their counselor. So I would talk to them about their procedure and sort of hear their story. And the vast majority of them, I mean, there was a sort of a pattern that always came up. It was never really about, actually being particularly nervous to access this service, but many of them had experienced, none of them had access to sexuality education. Their parents didn't know that they were there. They had an abusive partner. They didn't have health insurance. There was these sort of macro level patterns that kept arising. And so it made me realize that I don't necessarily think I belonged in direct service, but needed to kind of think about advocacy. And so I went to grad school and studied human rights, and that's how I became interested in HIV as a global health issue, a social justice issue, and really started working with GICA, the Global Youth Coalition on HIV and AIDS, and met this guy at least, and you as well, Jose. And so it was really just kind of about really combining, taking a cross-cutting approach to these issues and really thinking about how gender, race, sexuality really intersected sexual reproductive health and rights issues globally.
I have my own microphone. Thank you very much, Tumi, for the question. My apologies for not giving you something fun that I do. When you asked the question, I wasn't sure if being a big fan of Game of Thrones could count as a fun thing that I do. But yeah, when I look at my personal story, it's a very, everybody's story is unique, and I find that mine is the same in many ways. I am from Ghana, but I was born in Liberia. So I grew up, much of my childhood was during a very deadly civil war that ended in many children that I used to play with losing their lives. And those of us who were fortunate making it back to Ghana just with our lives. So I had it was very difficult to see how I would end up in a place like this with education and everything that I had. So my story featured a lot of women champions, starting with my mom, who went every length to make sure that even without nothing, she could get me the best education as I could. My big sister, who's been an immense support in my life. And in Ghana, we have what we call aunties. And these aunties are not just people you are related to by blood, but any woman who in any way contributes to your development. But I did not get involved. I'm forever grateful to all these women for the roles they played in my life and continue to play. But I did not get involved in what I do now just because of them. It was because of the story of Linda, a young girl who I used to teach in a community far from the capital city in Accra, where I used to volunteer to just teach rural kids. And one of the brightest kids in the room just stopped coming to class. And when I found out why she had stopped coming, it was because her mom had insisted that she stops because she had reached the 6th grade. And she would not be allowed to go beyond that because her big brother got to the 6th grade and dropped out of his own volition. And in their culture, it was unfathomable to think that the girl would go beyond where her big brother stopped. So it was stories like that where I had to intervene and go speak to her mom and say, no, it is okay to let your daughter go as far as she can. It is the story of my classmate from junior high school who I met a few years after completion. She was looking all good and recently married. And then I heard that Theodora was pregnant. The next time I heard about her, she had gone to deliver but did not make it. And it was because of very avoidable circumstances. It's a story of that woman just across my house, whose name I never knew, but always greeted on my way from school, who I heard had died just going to deliver. So it is these stories that really moved me to want to be a part of something bigger, to help change this in whatever small way I can. And that is what pushed me to join Curious Minds. And through the work that we have been doing, quite recently, starting a continent-wide campaign on reducing the high rates of maternal mortality in Africa. So there is an African Union initiative called CAMA, which is the Campaign for Accelerated Reduction of Maternal Mortality in Africa. And we have taken it on within AFRIAN to make sure we are able to get as many young people as possible to contribute in whatever small way they can to reducing maternal mortality. But we know also that you cannot address issues like HIV or maternal mortality in isolation. It has to come within the comprehensive spectrum of looking at it from a human rights perspective, and particularly from a sexual and reproductive rights perspective. So that has been the reason, and that has been the drive behind everything that I've done from that point up until now.
Thank you, Samuel. And first of all, I want to thanks to Itumelin and my other fellow speakers, Jose Roberto Luna, Lindsay Maynard, and Samuel also. My name is Zishan, and I'm from Lucknow, Uttar Pradesh. It's one of the biggest youth population-centric state of India. So I'm leading the organization, as she said, Ye Ek Soch Foundation. In short, you can say Yes Foundation. And before entering this development sector, I have been working in corporate sector last, I think, 4.5 year. And that time I realized that youth used as the only resource, not for potential. So we see young people as a tool for development, that is youth for development. And where we can analyze the potential of youth people for driving social change, because I have a strong belief that where there is a change, there are youth, and where there is a social change, there are also youth. Thank you.
I think one profound thing that came out from all the four of you as you were speaking to me was the boldness around some of the decisions you made as very young people. And one thing with youth is young people are known for their vibrancy, for their energy, and for their boldness. And Lindsay, you said something that was really interesting, and I just wanted to throw it back at you when you said you grew up in a family of feminists, and you said my mother and father were feminists. And I was wondering, you know, when do we accept that men can be feminists? Can we accept that men can be feminists? You know, what is the real issue behind men being called feminists, and how would you interpret that? Looking at, a lot of the discourse around feminism, masculinities, and all of that. I just found it very interesting statement.
If anyone's ever met my mother, they would know she's a pretty fierce woman, and in a great activist way. And I think in our family, there's not necessarily, I don't want to say there's not the option to not also identify as a feminist, but it's very infectious in the sense that I don't know how my father would have been able to sort of be in a relationship with my mother and not be supportive of the work that she's doing. There's no, she's a fantastic woman. But yeah, in the sense that he raised us, essentially. My mother's a CEO of a nonprofit in the U.S., and so was traveling a lot, and my father's an artist, was able to stay at home and raise us and take us to school. All these things that are sort of seem very revolutionary when I talk about it, and to me it's like, no, my dad made us lunch. My dad folded our laundry. My dad took me to the drugstore to buy tampons, These sort of things that seem sort of crazy. And so I think to sort of go back to your point, it's still a very, I don't want to say contentious, but it's not, I find it hard sometimes to find men who identify as feminists in the spaces that I occupy. And so and I think mostly because I've seen how my father raised us and sort of identified as a feminist in his own way. It's sort of like water to the fish. I thought I would find more feminist men out there, and it's still, aside from folks like these activists that I've worked with my whole life in that sense, but yeah, it's still interesting to find.
And perhaps we need to move out of the box that feminists are not always only women, and that feminism is about the ideology and what you subscribe to, and that anyone can be a feminist. I think that's maybe something that we're learning, and perhaps we can look at much later in detail. One thing, though, that Jose, that you spoke about passionately was the issue around sexual reproductive health and rights issues. And usually in a lot of the public spaces that we occupy, the issue of young people and sexual rights tends to come out very strongly. In your work, and especially looking at Guatemala as a country and within the region, within where Guatemala is, what have been your experiences around, sexual reproductive health and rights advocacy? What challenges are you facing, and are you starting to see some kind of movement where people are becoming more and more aware of sexual rights as an issue, and how they're not responding to that?
Yeah. I was thinking about the feminist and non-feminist spaces for men, and I think to talk about youth perspectives is to talk about the most transformative and confrontative, maybe, spaces in where we can do the difference. And the Latin American and the Caribbean Youth Network by the principles, they are working by the principles of the youth and feminist. And this is a network in where the adolescent girls or the young people, young women and young men are working together, and we are thinking all the time, it's not the most important thing if you are taking directly the identity of feminists, but we are working transforming power relationship. This is feminism, I know that is not an easy way. It's like when we are talking about gender identities, we are talking about trans identities, people, it's not too easy. They are women or not. They are pending issues that we need to talk. We need to do reflections, profound reflections about it, because the power identities are present too. And we need to talk about it. And it's it's in a very linked or very high connection with your other question, that it's not too easy to work advocating for sexual and reproductive rights in my country and in our region, because even when we are thinking in Latin America and US than more open regions, in reality the young people are living with afraid their sexuality, They are more free in different sense, but they are fighting against very, very conservative rules, very gender norms against the young people, and it's not completely permitted to live their sexuality in our countries. And it's not in a very confrontative way, We are talking in Central America, in Guatemala and Latin America about double moral. You can do different things in the front line, but behind the table, a lot of conditions of life are happening. And to make the decision to do advocacy in the sexual and reproductive rights ways has different costs, like works with gender equality also, Young people are fighting, they are talking about different issues that are not easy to talk, about gender issues, about abortion, about the right of access of different decisions, and I think we have to do a very, very strong work transforming the power relationship into the social movements also, because we are fighting for a real participation for young people. And to talk about gender justice, to talk about feminism, is to talk about transforming adult-centrism in the organizations, into the movements, into even the youth-led organizations, because the power relationship are present in every single place in which we are acting as transforming or transformation actors. So.
Thank you. And then, Zishan, one of the things in your introduction was how you started off as a business person or working in the corporate sector. And for a lot of us, you know, the work into youth activism starts as volunteers. And I just find it a very interesting history, you know, where somebody starts off in the private sector and then moves on to youth type-led work, you know, either as a youth, as a manager of a youth organization working with young people. Can you just explain to us that transition? You know, what prompted you to move from that space and then starting up an NGO, which you're now heading and now working exclusively with young people?
Thank you. Hi, thank you, Yatimaling. First of all, my transformation from working in corporate sector to development sector, or you can say in social sector, is that I was realizing at that time that it was very tough for a young people to survive in this type of environment, this type of work where justice and like sort of activities is not. So I want to start from the theme of the symposium as Man and Boys for Gender Justice. It really encompasses a holistic approach to understanding masculinities in different domains in a globalized world. And if we really want to create a world which allows everyone equal opportunity and space, then we have to come together and work on this immediate decision. And I think this is the right time to discuss about this, to take a decision about youth. And secondly, would like to focus on the topic that I have to present, the potential of young people as actor for social change. So when I got the opportunity to talk about the potential of youth for social change, I must admit, really, that I have never perceived myself from such an angle. And after various interactions as well and deliberations with people, finally I found myself in such a scenario. And so in the same context, like the way I as a young speaker took time to understand, where then all of us can better realize the extent of dilemma which our youth would be going through as well. And youth constitute almost half of the total population of the world, and we are facing challenges like health issues, discrimination, unemployment, and most SRH issues. So the time that we have to focus on youth, because youth is not a client for development interventions. They have problems and that we need to address. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zishan. And Semi, when you were talking about the karma work that you do, and you spoke about being part of a structure such as the African Union, you know, those are spaces that a lot of us usually find difficult to access as young people. And if you could just share with us, you know, your introduction into working with a regional body such as the African Union. And are you finding that, you know, entry points for young people, whether it's within the African Union or any other regional structures, do you find it much more easier now? Are you feeling like the ground has been softened a little bit for entry as young advocates to engage in issues around SRHR or any other social justice issue, given what you do and your experience with it?
Well, the quick answer is that yes, it is a lot easier now than it was when I first got involved, for instance. But we still nowhere near where we need to get. And that is why many, many years after, you still hear young people talking about youth participation. And I know that there are many people who are tired of hearing us call for, we need a seat at the table, but it means that we still have some room to go. Now, for many of us from places like Ghana, we grew up in a culture where children and young people were supposed to be seen but not heard. So getting that initial acceptance to get your voice heard was a big deal. Now, we're seeing that a lot more spaces are opening up thanks to the many years of activism and a lot of push from civil society. However, youth participation will not be complete if you just say, here we need 10 people to make this decision, we're going to give 3 seats to young people, and you just pick some young people you do not, young people who've not gotten, had any support, any capacity building, and processes like at the African Union, at the United Nations. These are processes that are quite complex sometimes. And even the adults who engage with them would have gone through many, many years of training just to get the grounding to be able to effectively participate in those spaces. So when you just throw young people in there, it's good that we're giving the space, but it's not good enough. We need to look at how we are helping within the youth movement in building our own capacity, ensuring that young people are equipped to not just be occupants of seats at the table, but be effective representatives of their fellow young people when they are at that table. So there is that bit that I think we really lose, where nobody wants to be the one investing in that capacity building, because it's not the cool thing. The cool one is to get young people in the streets, at the demonstration, and doing all the things that you can take pictures for and show. And so I think that is a big challenge. There's also the second part where the spaces in which young people operate are still quite limited. So in the main places where the big decisions are taken, it is structured in such a way that it's really difficult for young people to participate. It's member states driven, and it's representative from the government who is speaking in official capacity, and there's no real structured process of engaging young people. In Nigeria, I heard that there's a saying that you cannot shave a man's head in his absence. But if you take that to the bigger development circle, we've had lots of magicians in our leaders who've been shaving our heads when we're nowhere near the vicinity. So I think this needs to stop. We need to find a more structured way of involving young people, of collecting their input, of enhancing their capacity, and ensuring that the things that they say do not just get applause, but get reflected in the final decisions that are taken.